All right, everybody, welcome back for another Deep Dives with us. Today we're going all the way to the Philippines. We're going to be looking at a documentary, really interesting one. It's called Alipato at Muog.
Flying Embers and a Fortress, if you translate it
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah, and it really is about this captivating mystery that unfolds around this activist, Jonas Burgos, who disappeared in 2007. And this film, the director, JL Burgos, is actually Jonas's brother.
Wow, that's
I
incredible.
know, it adds this whole other layer of complexity to this story, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just fascinating because it's not just like an observer looking in, it's someone who's deeply personally invested in finding the truth.
Absolutely. So let's get into it then. Can you kind of set the stage for us a little bit? Who was Jonas Burgos and what happened to him?
So Jonas Burgos was really involved in farmers' rights advocacy. He was working directly with farmers in rural communities. And this, as you can imagine, kind of put him in the crosshairs of some pretty powerful figures, especially in a country like the Philippines. You have this long history of land disputes, social inequality, all these things. So he was a little bit of a thorn in the side of some folks.
Right. I mean, I imagine that sort of activism, especially in certain parts of the world, you're going to ruffle some feathers.
Absolutely.
So what were the circumstances around his disappearance then?
Well, he was abducted from, get this, a busy shopping mall in Quezon City. It was the Evergrotesco Mall, and there were witnesses. Several people saw him being taken, so it wasn't like this was some, back alley kind of thing. It was very brazen.
Ah,
And quickly, the finger was pointed at the military.
so
Yeah,
this becomes a much more kind of complex and layered story than just somebody just disappearing.
exactly.
So we know that the filmmaker JL Burgos is the brother of Jonas. How does he kind of approach this in the film?
So stylistically, this film is really interesting. I mean, just the way it looks, it blends all these different formats. So you'll be seeing like grainy footage from old mini DVD tapes that they had,
Oh,
home videos of Jonas's life and his activism. And then it'll cut to these really sharp, high definition scenes, 4K even, as JL is retracing Jonas's steps, doing interviews, trying to piece it all together.
that's really interesting the way you describe it. It's almost like the film style mirrors that investigation
Totally.
process.
Totally, yeah.
The uncovering of the truth and kind of that almost like blurry, like home video footage,
Yeah.
maybe turning into something more clear and concise as the investigation goes along.
Absolutely. And it really draws you in like you're right there with him on this journey.
So I understand that this film was actually critically acclaimed. It won some awards, but it also faced a lot of challenges when it came to censorship, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So it premiered at a really prestigious film festival in the Philippines, the Cinemalaya Philippine Independent Film Festival. This was back in 2024, and it won the special jury prize there. But then it gets hit with an X rating by the MTRCB,
What?
the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a mouthful. But they're basically the folks who can classify and even censor films in the Philippines.
And an X rating, I mean, that's essentially a ban, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So what was their justification for that? I mean, why?
Well, their reasoning was that the film undermined public confidence in the government,
Oh, okay.
which you can imagine sparked a ton of controversy. I mean, an X rating is usually reserved for things that are like, pornographic or excessively violent.
Right.
So to use that for a documentary about a missing activist, a lot of people saw this as a pretty blatant attempt to just silence a critical voice.
Absolutely. I can see how people would draw that conclusion right away, especially when you consider the circumstances surrounding Jonas' disappearance, and then you slap an X rating on a documentary that's critical of the government.
Mm.
It's a little suspect, I think.
Right. Exactly.
So how did JL Burgos and the people who are behind the film respond to this?
Well, they weren't just going to take this lying down. So they organized this whole campaign to challenge the rating. You had activists, filmmakers, human rights groups, all these people coming together. And their argument was that, look, this film is an exercise of free speech. It's freedom of expression. And if you suppress that, what kind of message are you sending? It's a dangerous precedent.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what happened? Were they successful?
Thankfully, yes. There was a lot of public pressure, some legal back and forth, and eventually the MTRCB caved and downgraded the rating to R16.
Okay, so at least it could be shown.
Yeah, it meant that the film could be screened, still with some age restrictions, but at least it wasn't completely banned.
What a victory.
Yeah, it really was.
That's incredible to see. People pushing back against censorship and using art to raise awareness about these really important issues. For our listeners out there who maybe aren't familiar with Philippine politics or even Southeast Asia, What do you think is the kind of overarching message that they should take away from this?
At its heart, this story is about searching for truth and justice, right? It's about family and the courage to speak truth to power, even when it's dangerous. And those themes, they resonate everywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter where you're from, what your background is, those are universal experiences.
Yeah, that's a great point. Kind of transcends borders.
Yeah.
Even though it takes place in the Philippines, it's something we can all relate to on a human level.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that these struggles, these fights for justice and accountability and free speech, they're happening all over the world.
Yeah,
Often by everyday people going up against huge obstacles.
yeah. Well, I think this has been a really fascinating look at a really compelling story. We've got this mystery surrounding Jonas's disappearance, this incredible personal quest that his brother goes on to find answers, and then this fight against censorship. Really thought-provoking stuff. But I want to leave our listeners with one final thought here. What role do you think documentaries like this, like Alipato at Muog, can play in creating real change? Can art really be a catalyst for justice? And what other stories are out there waiting to be told? Stories of resilience, of courage, maybe in the Philippines or elsewhere in the world. I think that's something worth pondering.
For sure. It definitely is.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely.
And we'll catch you next time.
See you later.